Hey guys.
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Or good
Halfway
brunch
through my
time.
Starbucks, so I'm wide awake. All right. Why aren't we all buying on time yet? Adam, start with you. Go.
You won't pitch me that currency at Fox.
I've tried.
It's the upfront. Like, can we change the currency?
We're trying. Matt, why can't we buy on time yet?
Well, I'm not buying anything anymore, but were I still to be buying, we wouldn't be buying time because we're just not structured to do that yet. Right. So we have these legacy systems and structures, and we need help in getting past our own issues.
And why aren't we buying time yet?
I think some of the insights that have come out have been really interesting, but we try to stress doing things right as opposed to doing them first. So I think figuring out what to do with all these new metrics and taking our time to make sure we do it in a thoughtful way, I think is the priority right now.
So let me just throw out I run into a lot of this trying to figure out a way to explain the absurdity of the impression system, and it applies to both display and video. Half the ad for 2 seconds, 2/3 of the ad for 5 seconds, the whole ad for 20 seconds, the whole ad taking up the whole screen for 30 seconds, the whole ad taking up the whole screen for 40 seconds, the whole ad taking up the whole screen for 60 seconds. Everything I just listed counts as an impression, right? Like there's no differentiation. Impression is a binary feature. And we came from the world of television where all impressions were the same thing. What is stopping us from rating the impression? Or at least saying, okay, like half the ad for 2 seconds is a 1, and the whole ad taking up the whole screen for 30 seconds is 100. And I just made that up.
So I don't disagree with that. I think what's holding us back is whether or not any of those could be qualified as an impression because we know that they make an impression. And right now, I think it's still early innings to better define what the methodology is for measuring that, understanding the impact to a brand's business, whatever the metric might be, and then finding ways to replicate and scale that in all the various formats that it needs to be applied to. And there's just too many competing definitions right now. So yes, that's maybe not the right approach, but it's a approach. And I think as an industry, we need to sort of coalesce around that and figure out what the right definition should be or what a better definition should be.
I think also, we have to, kind of separate what we optimize against, what we buy against. I mean, there's so many metrics that are out that are based on probability now. It's very difficult to kind of have a constant kind of variable in market that we can buy against, right? So an impression is a fixed variable, an ad being in view is not, time spent is not. So we need to be careful of kind of what we put on which side of the fence. And to your point, all of those scenarios are an impression. I would also say that all of those scenarios have value. It's just a matter of making sure that we understand what that value is, and we compensate, for that experience in a way that, allows us to get back some sort of, return on investment or return on value for our clients.
And just to build on that, if we plan that way, instead of planning based on reach frequency, sorry, I don't know if this is cutting out. So if we plan that way, instead, I have not had enough coffee today, and the night just went right into the morning. If we plan based on those metrics instead of like on traditional sort of reach frequency building blocks, which do not take into account quality, don't take into account impact, don't take into account whether or not someone's paying attention, it will start to change the paradigm. But we need new models in order to start to build against that.
Well, and it actually goes to something probably bigger, which is what is the overall objective here? So we right now are compensated based upon how many dollars get spent, and it's a good thing on the agency side to get dollars spent. It's not necessarily a good thing on the client side to have those dollars we spend. It's a good thing to spend as few of them as possible. We are so not around ROI yet as an industry. We're really not trying to correlate advertising with effectiveness. And some fairly fundamental things have to happen before we can do that. And it's great that it's starting here because it's the right thing to be doing, but it has really significant impact on the entire, I hate the word ecosystem, but ecosystem.
Yeah. But do you feel like, I'm going to be leading the question here because I'm a terrible moderator because I have too many opinions. But
you have really, really good socks.
yeah, stormtroopers, guys.
Those are impressive.
Just because I figured, there. Now, do you feel as though that there's a bit of a problem, a bit of a trap with the ROI argument, which is if I was gonna write a letter on behalf of all the consumers on the planet, I would say, dear marketer, your ROI is not my problem. Meaning, if you borrowed my attention, the market price, the market clearing price for an ad should be the cost of a person's attention. And I find it hard to argue that ad blockers, DVRs, Hulu ad-free, I think is the best thing to happen to advertising in this year. Because it sets the market price for attention at, okay, the consumer's BATNA is now $4 a month, right? So, I mean, does it feel like we need to go through a shift? I mean, like whether it's time spent or something else, I mean, we have to go through a shift that looks towards a flight to quality and higher prices, but that we're not built for that right now. How do we get there?
Well, sorry.
Okay.
No, you go. I'm just going to hit you.
Ow. That means I have feelings. We
Agency people with feelings.
No, agency people have no feelings. We have thick skin. So here's the thing. Most briefs start with what? A TV spot. That's not
Thanks.
the right way to plan, even if TV is the right vessel for a message to be delivered to an audience. We have to think about, to your point, what are we trying to achieve? What's the impact we want to drive? How are we going to measure it? What do we know about consumers who we're trying to reach, or the people that we're trying to reach? Because they might not be consumers, right? We might have to persuade them to become our customers. They might fit some other mode. What do we know about all of them? What do we know about the environment? What are we trying to say to get them to take some action, to change their behavior, to open their wallets or their hearts and minds? And then what are we going to do to design an experience to deliver on that, whether it's adding value in a moment, whether it's producing content for them that is actually going to fulfill some need for something that they're seeking, or entertaining them or educating them, whatever that might be. That might be a 30-second spot. It might not be. It's probably not a banner ad. But until we fundamentally change the way that we approach the problem, we're not going to solve it. And I think too often we're using these blunt instruments that we've been using forever, and it's not getting us any further. It's causing us to have more of these conversations, which is great because we need to debate it, but something's got to give.
But can I would challenge I was having this discussion with someone who's very new age, new media internet-y, and they were being all very new age.
Was it
internet-y.
Shingy?
I'm not gonna name names, but
love
they're
Shingy.
like, why is it a 30-second spot? Like, shouldn't a story just be as long as a story needs to be? And I was like, I wanted to just sit and snap my fingers for a minute. And I was like, that's fantastic. I agree. Like, whatever the goal of the brand is, who knows how long the story needs to be? But there's a problem. You can't trade billions of dollars on a random metric. You need a commodity price. You need to set a market price. And so we set the market price around 30 seconds. I don't care if it's 15 seconds. I don't care if it's 10 seconds. But what would it take to get the agencies to start saying, or the brand marketers to start saying, okay, we understand that there's a fundamental difference between these two. We're not trying to arbitrage towards lowest cost. We're trying to arbitrage towards highest quality. Like, what would it take to get there?
Again, because I am a broken record, I think it is around compensation. So right now, if you think about how a holding company is structured, it is all about, it's a procurement-based model, which is ironic because we rail against procurement, but we actually founded ourselves based on procurement as in capture spend. So we as public companies need to capture as many dollars as we possibly can. So if there is a new methodology that allows us to work on some other compensation, then we all win. So what is the most effective way for a marketer to communicate? What is the medium that is most engaging, whatever that means anymore? But were it to be that there is content that people want and an advertiser shows up there and provides a value, and we can measure like that 28%, that something good happened because of that, a measure that could come from that is we therefore can spend fewer dollars. So imagine a world in which we were all evaluated based upon how few dollars it took to achieve a business outcome rather than how many dollars it took to achieve a business outcome. Imagine a world in which our compensation was actually tied to business outcome, not delivery, but sales, real ROI. And it is scandalous to me how few clients actually want to measure ROI. They would really rather have an apples to apples, spots and dots to spots and dots rather than did the cash register ring. So there is still, I think, a fundamental need for alignment around business outcome.
I think, when we talked about Well, when viewability started to really, become a big part of the conversation, there was a sentiment that, okay, well, now we're just going to buy unviewable ads, and the non-viewable ads are worth, nothing, which in part is true. But again, we're buying on probability, and as long as the market reflects the price of the value and experience that a user has when they're engaging with that content, whether they see the ad or not, you know, I may be optimistic here, but I don't think we should, kind of carve out supply that only works towards a metric of time spent, right? So when I hear things, that brand affinity or brand recall is 5 times higher when an ad is viewed, I think it was 5 seconds or more. That's fantastic, but my first thought isn't, okay, I want to get rid of all the ads that maybe have been seen for like 1 or 2 seconds or partly on the page. I think there's still value there, and I don't think that we have to completely slash our media budgets to just focus on where the highest value is. I think it's more about the journey, less about the moment. So it's really about finding a place for those insights, whether it be more time spent yields higher engagement or a higher probability to purchase, or maybe lower time spent, lower viewability, lower probability of being in view is something that has value, but we need to understand what to pay for that value and at what point in the user journey do we want that experience to happen. There are just too many variables and too much of a variance in experiences with ads, and no really good way to predict what's going to happen for us to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, okay, now we're just going to focus on premium completely. I think in a supply-driven market, we have to really plan against the full scope end to end.
But time spent doesn't happen in any one instance, right? It doesn't happen in some chunk of 30 seconds. Stories get told over time, and they get told in fragments of chunks of time, right, that add up over some period of time. So if you can start to constrain what story you want to tell to some sort of band of time that you're going to have to piece all the fragments together till you get to that point when you can see the impact that's made, whether it's from the first touch to the last or somewhere in between, because you can start to attribute it back, then you can start to value what those fragments are actually worth, or what someone's attention is truly worth over a period of time for you to make an impact. But it's not going to happen because something was 100% viewable and you got it in front of them for 20 seconds and that's it. Like you don't just check the box after that. You've got to think about it over the course of time or the duration of the relationship that you could potentially have with someone.
I guess the question becomes, we're constantly referring to the value of someone's time as what is worth to us instead of what is worth to them. I mean, it's hard to fathom that somewhere along the way we forgot that your CPM is someone else's time, meaning that a $30 CPM is 3 cents for 30 seconds of Joe's time to watch a video, which means that Fox can only give Joe 3 cents worth of Empire. And I don't know if you know how much Empire costs to make, but it's going to take a lot of 3 cents ads. And this has led to DVRs and Netflix and Hulu ad-free. And it feels like for the first time the industry is in a place where I'm not saying that we all move to time spent because it's for the storytelling benefit. It's because we're looking for ways to justify higher value and lower ad loads. I said at another event that the promise of advanced advertising, which is my title, and I'm not sure what it means yet, but I'm going to find out. Like they're going to have to.
You're
tell
advancing
me.
it.
Yeah, I'm advancing advertising. I'm actually just thinking everyone will use Hulu ad-free someday. I'll go into work every day, find out if people want ads. The answer will be no, and I'll just have a cup of coffee and hang out, and it's going to be a good day. But the promise of advanced advertising isn't more money. It would be, in an ideal world, it would be the same amount of money for 1/10 the ads. And so when I look at things like time spent and I look at things like engagement, what I'm trying to do is say, can I get rid of the frequency need so that we can have less total ads with the same dollars? Because we don't need it. And the problem is that on the brand side, waste is fine as long as the price keeps getting lower. But on the consumer side, it's not anymore. And so I can't reconcile the two things with the constant figuring out of, okay, we're driving towards lower price and realizing that the consumers are bucking against that right now. And I call them consumers in this setting because we're talking about them buying things. Like I refer to athletes as athletes when they're playing sports.
But what people are demonstrating is that if they could avoid ads, they would. And they go to great lengths to do that. And that OTT is a beautiful thing because the content is better, because the investment was greater, and because it's not interrupted by all those people that you didn't invite into your content experience. The problem is that the average person is spending $85 a month on paid content and wishes they were spending more, like 40. And we need to help them because content isn't actually free, and America is gluttonous, and we will just continue to spend and spend and spend until we pop. So, $85, wish that was 40, know that we're going to be asked to spend even more on the a la cartes because they're going to cost more and more and more, and because we want more and more and more. So marketers have to show up in a way that defrays that cost. And wouldn't it be swell if we could have an honest conversation with consumers or people or whatever that says, here's the thing, we make this stuff because you want this stuff. It's not free, however. There's numbers of ways in which you can get this stuff for less. One is you can invite marketers in and maybe even select which of the marketers come in. Because right now, targeting is weird because you either get, oh my God, how did you know I was just talking to my wife about that and not when you were around, get off of my screen, or why are you talking to me about femme hygiene products because they're not applicable to me? Like there's such a spectrum of what targeting is.
I still think a tweet of the year goes to, I forget who did it, I want to give him credit, but it was like, I think he said Amazon, the 250 billion market cap company that said, this guy just bought a vacuum. This guy must love vacuums. Because retargeting, that's basically how it works.
Yeah.
But the promise of targeting should be to be able to, if I could cut waste in half, can we double price? Well, no, because then your reach frequency, how can we get to a cost per effective reach so that we can drive prices up, but not in a way that's like saying, hey, we want media companies to be gluttonous and make more money. We want to make it so that consumers don't opt to pay themselves.
Well, if we could allow them choice, if it were, rather than us being as good as we could possibly be at targeting, rather allowing people to choose what marketers they'd like to defray their costs, then that changes the equation. The recognition that somebody's got to pay for this and that you could actually select which marketers you want to have pay for your content feels like an evolution in a very different way from how we are working today. The Hulu ad-free, beautiful. Hulu with ads, terrible. Because they let you know that the experience you've been enjoying is about to become less enjoyable and that there's not a damn thing in the world you can do about it. Like, I hate that little thing in the upper left-hand corner that says, torturing you now, nothing you can do about it. But if it were to be that I knew that those shows came to me because somebody I cared about brought them to me, then come on in.
I think also, when we talk about just the web and kind of the way that users interact with it, I think as an industry we've been playing catch up almost the entire time, right? And that's users have a mentality that they should get content for free, but the important thing to note is that if they don't get that content for free, there's an alternative. I mean, people are engaging with content across multiple devices. I mean, there's long tail content, in categories of news and entertainment and video that are widely accessible to users, right? So, as premium content holders start to adjust, the ways in which they manage their yield, or maybe they price, more engaging content, whether it's video or not, so that, they know exactly how much they should charge for time spent. There's no guarantee that users are going to kind of follow along. They'll be led to water, but who knows if they're going to drink. So.
Wait, on that point, whether users follow along or not, I'm not sure that matters. I think what matters is, and it was some of the stuff Moat was showing earlier, but there's an article a day on we broke the internet. It's our fault. I truly believe that the internet is full of incredibly smart people, and whatever you ask of them, they will develop. The first thing we asked of them is, I need a pixel on a server to fire, viewable or not viewable, don't care. So the internet abided, and there were tons of them, and there were pages everywhere. And it didn't matter if you wrote the Economist article that someone spent 6 minutes with, or if you wrote the whatever they had just showed up there, both counted as an impression. I go back. And so I'm not saying that the people follow. I'm saying that what role do agencies, marketers, and publishers play in fixing this, fixing metrics so that quality content survives on advertising? Because right now, quality content does not survive on advertising, period. There's just a flood of companies looking for new ways, subscription-based and out. So I guess if time spent is one of those things that we say, quality content gets more time spent on it, therefore can marketers help us by buying on this? Of course it has to be justified, we have to say this is the return. And that goes back to there's a limited amount of attention.
And or what the overarching objective is. So if you think about viewability, meaning I'm going to suffer through something I really, really don't want. You can skip this ad in 5, 4, 3, just end the torture, and I know that I'm going to be back to something I enjoy. If, on the other hand, what time spent is around is figuring out what people actually choose to spend their time with, and that the advertising product improves because we can measure which ones people are spending no time with and which time people are spending more time with, and then we can actually educate marketers on what seems to work and what doesn't seem to work. I love that as a step towards a better world. But it has to be distribution and content working together. It's not just the time, it's the product that exists within that time and the overall learning that we get from that juxtaposed with our collective desire to skip it all if we could.
So people want to spend more time with the content they want to consume. So ad selector is a great way to do it. It's a great way to bridge the sort of brought to you by, I'm going to stop annoying you now. In fact, what I'm going to do is add value to your experience and not interrupt you anymore. And maybe I'll remind you at the end that I did that, and you'll thank me for it. Maybe you'll buy
You
something.
can just refer to those as Truex engagement ads going forward.
But if that can be replicated in a lot of different ways, if the value that you add to someone's experience is more of what they want, and you can measure that to some sort of level of effectiveness, then you can start to put a premium on it. You could also start to reduce ad load. You could also start to create more of what people want and less of the please get me out of here. What NBC is trying to do with Saturday Night Live, if you haven't read about it, is reduce the commercial load, bring a couple brands in, and create more content that you could call branded content, you could call it sponsored content. They don't know what it is yet. But to work with brands to find a way to add more and create more value in that viewing experience. How that's going to translate from TV to the web to social, who knows? They're still trying to figure it out, but I commend them for it because they're recognizing that people that want to watch SNL want to watch more of it. How could they do that? Well, it's got to be funded in some way. Smart marketers are going to find ways to do it and take some of the credit for it, but improve that product, improve that experience. To me, that's adding value. If you could demonstrate how that drives some impact for those brands that are involved in their business, suddenly you can find new ways to replicate that and scale it. It's not one size fits all. You have nuances of that and how it's going to work in different platforms, different ad formats, different categories, but it's rethinking the model. Instead of just saying someone's attention is valued in 30 or 15-second increments at a CPM of X, because that's how it's been, or because that's how much of it we have to sell, and I've just done the math, and that's what it costs. There's got to be a better mousetrap.
I mean, look, I would make the argument that one of the big reasons we're here is that the single largest ad delivery vehicle on the planet, which is television, just never had this problem, right? Like, people could get up and not watch a commercial, or they could be distracted. They could but the ad was always 100% of the screen, fully viewable for the entirety of the ad. You can argue over measurement all you want, but there wasn't warehouses full of TVs racking off Nielsen impressions, right?
Well, we don't know that.
Not that we know of, anyway. Still, but then we took that definitional of an impression, and that made perfect sense. Agencies and publishers should just be butting heads over who can get a lower price. Let's use buying power to lower the price because it's a commodity. Then we moved to the internet and we said, we just need a lower price for impressions. And the internet said, I have an idea. I will give you crappier impressions. And voila, lower price for impressions. So I guess what I see when I look at what Moat is doing and Parsec and others in the space is that there are a few players who are saying, what could we do to kind of buck the trend of lower price, lower quality? Because every time the price gets lower, the quality just gets lower. I use an example. Every Q4, there are more ad impressions in the world on the internet. Is that weird to anyone? Does anyone watch more ads on purpose during Q4?
We've been missing them all year.
Yeah, because all year, the first 3 quarters, you're like, you know what I need now is more ads.
I binge watch ads.
You save them all for later, and then you just, yeah.
There was a model for that a couple years ago.
Somebody should be sitting there going, that seems odd that there's all of a sudden more people watching more ads, because there's still 24 hours last I checked, and we're probably busier than ever, and yet there's more ads. And it's just because the industry says, please give us more at that time. I mean, what should they be doing if we can't get it into the buying model as it is right now? What is one step towards getting towards effective impressions versus just impressions?
Go back to the ad selector model, and maybe that's one version of it. But if everyone who's measuring the impact of attentiveness inside a content experience as a means of getting people to take some action or behave differently, as well as not totally hit them over the head to a point where they tune out versus that they're tuning in. Don't publishers have a responsibility to change their page layouts, change their ad load, change the frequency of rotation? By the way, find a way to make that a more premium environment and come to me with a case that shows me why the relative increase in cost is going to be worth 10x the impact that I can have. Because right now, quite frankly, there's a lot of shit out there, and it's not just in Q4.
It's very hard. I mean, look, we do this all the time, going and saying, look, this is going to be worth 5 to 10 times what you were buying, but then you have to buy it at this. But it's hard for publishers. I mean, I know we talk to them all the time, and outside of Fox, into the print publishers, so News Corp and others, it's like a prisoner's dilemma. Okay, fine, we'll change ours. We're going to reduce our ad load by 50%. We're going to make all of our ads much more viewable, but they still count as impressions on a sheet. So until we can start rating the impression for likelihood of attention, it gets really hard for them to change, and that's why they're seeking other models. Have you seen anything that you do like, that you do buy on other than impressions, or had bought on other than impressions? Or a scoring mechanism that you look at when you say, how valuable is an impression to us?
Yeah, I think, for a performance campaign, we buy on acquisitions. However, we don't want to buy on acquisitions from a broken attribution model. We buy on viewable acquisitions, right? So if the last ad or last series of ads have been seen, then we count it towards an acquisition. If it's not, then we don't. And that encourages publishers to improve some of the lower quality inventory that have been, really been running rampant within DR models for a very long time. But just to get back to one of the points you made about, the impression quality gets lower, but still, because we buy in an impression, we're still buying. And it's like in Q4, we've seen that trend over the last few years, and as more impressions, as impressions go up, advertisers just keep, funneling money into Q4. We have to get there. We have to have our share of voice. I don't think that trend is gonna stop. I think, as premium publishers start to better monetize those experiences and time spent and all those other variables become part of the equation, there's always a reaction, and it's very interesting to me that, those long tail publishers, the one that we always define as having that low quality inventory, there's always a reaction on that side of the market. And it's not that dissimilar to the reaction that a lot of these fraud companies have, which makes me very nervous about time spent, because we have to anticipate that this technology is going to be replicated, and we're going to start seeing this happen within the fraud space. But those publishers are going to start changing their sites as well. Those publishers are going to start understanding how to monetize their yield, because they've been doing it for the last 10 years. And once they do that, now you're going to have not a premium experience with time spent on a Fox or on a CNN versus just an ad impression. You're going to have really going to have a dilemma in terms of how you define premium. Is premium, the time spent, with the ad, or does premium involve kind of a more complicated definition that involves, alignment with a well-known brand, around, a contextual environment that's relevant to my brand? And if it's the former, then premium publishers are going to have the same problem that they've always had, which is, now I have to compete with a supply side that's more robust than anything we had seen before in television or any other medium.
But if we place the premium on the audience, which is really what we care about, right? I care about who I'm reaching, how I'm reaching them, and the impact I'm trying to make. And I start to hold my publishing partners and platform partners to a higher standard and demand not just transparency against how they're going to deliver that and how they're going to charge me for it and how they're going to measure it, but I stop the bad behavior of a lot of the shit in the long tail. Suddenly, I believe the problem starts to correct itself, but not completely, because not everyone's going to be focused on the same goals, and not everyone's going to be focused. Not everyone has the incentive to make that a reality right now.
But when you add pay for performance into that and have that cascade through the entire, here it is again, ecosystem, then it actually does work. Because if you say, back to the brief that you want, which I love, start with a business objective. Who are we trying to appeal to? What action do we want them to take? Then what are the right channels and the right stories we need to tell within those channels that are going to help lead to that outcome, and then be measured against how successful we were in the outcome, which is not just delivering an impression or telling a story, but actually did they buy something? That, to me, has to be what our collective objective is. Then everything else begins to fall into place.
But in order for that to be possible, you have to have impact over pricing, you have to have impact over creative, you have to have impact over, PR disasters from finding a sweatshop in the Middle East.
so
I mean, there's all sorts of things you have to, the isolating for the variable of media, which is isolating for the variable of, I have a version of what Moat put up there, which is, I think, the most valuable natural resource on the planet Earth is human attention. Like, you want to cure cancer, get people to pay attention to it. You want to sell a pair of shoes, they got to pay attention to start with. There is a finite, it's like the original Bitcoin. There's 24 hours a day that's made, and we're all in the business of both dispensing it and gathering it, right?
But when it works, it was the message. When it fails, it was the media. And we've got to get out of that too, because all this stuff works together. And while I'm a bit biased, but I've worked in a couple different shops that have been both full service and what they've delivered, as well as that take into consideration how all these touch points work together. Everything has to be held accountable to a similar standard. If I didn't say the right thing, but I had the right opportunity, then I got to figure out how to say the right thing. If I had the right thing to say, but I misfired on the opportunity, then I got to get smarter about targeting. But
You
it's
just
got
have
to
to know
work.
which one is the problem. You have to
But it doesn't
And
matter.
how you can get them to work better together.
What 1987, Procter & Gamble challenged their agencies, and back then we were just the agency. There was no first names or anything else. We were just the agency. And the challenge was to align with Procter's business outcome. And we said exactly what you did, which is we can't do that because we don't control in-store pricing, competition, weather, all that kind of stuff. And Procter said, really, you don't think that how our business is doing should have an impact on how your business is doing? And we said, no, your problem, not ours. At the time, we made 17.65% on production, 15% on media. 17.65 went away, gone, zero. And the 15 went down to between 8 and 10% before we created holding companies for ourselves because we had to capture the dollar some other way. I wonder if we shouldn't consider answering the question the right way now, which is, sure, we don't control everything, but I can tell you I'm a hell of a lot better partner to my client when I'm thinking about their business outcome, and I'm thinking about it because that's how I'm being paid, not what's the role of media, what's the role of digital within media. It's, am I curing cancer? Am I selling shoes? So honestly, everything else just fits into place when you are aligned with business outcome. And every other problem is because we're not. Fix that, Joe.
Have you heard of Empire? I have a contractual 3 Empire mention every time I do something, so I think that's 2. I think we're going to questions, or yes. So we're going to go to questions. So if anyone has any, raise your hand. I don't know the names of the stormtroopers on my socks. I don't think either of them are Finn. So.
I have a question. I appreciate the conversation around alignment with business outcomes, but I'm sort of curious about what happens, in the messy middle over the next year or 2 or 3, because you guys all have clients who are VPs of media and marketing, and their personal interest is to continue to spend a lot of money and to maintain large marketing budgets. So maybe there's a world that we get to where we just see less ads and spend less money on advertising, but right now, almost everyone in the system is incented to have more money in the system. So if online publishers who are very eager to capture TV dollars come to you, and if your collective media buying teams who are very worried about the evaporation of TV dollars or TV inventory, they come to you with this cost per second model, are you willing to do it? And I get that there's friction in your systems in terms of execution, but what is it going to take to get to this cost per second buying model? And is it realistic this year or next year?
I think we need more evidence of how it's going to help us achieve our objectives. So yes, we have to find out how that works. We've got to come up with the right methodology for what we're trying to achieve, what the right ways of measuring it are, how that works vis-a-vis other models, and put it to the test. There's no reason to not look at it and give it a hard look, especially when we know how fragmented the world is and that it's not getting any less fragmented. That notion of the reach you used to be able to deliver in a 30-second spot at a particular frame or a particular point in time could be framed pretty easily, and it was pretty predictable what you could get. It now probably takes 10 to 20 to 50 times the media weight in 100 different places in 1,000 different formats to replicate a lot of that. Maybe not for Empire,
Thank you.
Nice.
That actually covers for me, so we're good.
It's called it's a callback. But maybe not for things like Empire or big primetime hits or live events, but those are becoming more anomalies than sort of standards. And I think it forces us to look at new models to find ways to both recoup the attention that we've lost, or the audience that we've lost, or the reach that we can't gain as easily, and find new and different ways to prove out how and why that's better, and how and why that's where I should invest.
What if we backed into it? What if we didn't make it so hard right away and try to break the whole model and say, let's go to a cost per second? What if we just said, okay, fine, a CPM of the minimum, half an ad for 2 seconds is worth $5 or $4, whatever it is. And then there's something that's been in view 10 seconds is worth 3 impressions, something that's been in, rather than the ad reloading. I mean, is there a way to back into the models that you use now, and would that be something you'd work with?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, if someone came to me and said I have a time, a cost per time spent model, the first thing I would think of is great. Let me understand what this means for my strategy, right? I don't want to just be told, hey, we're gonna offer you X dollar amount per second, or however it's going to be modeled. As a buyer, I want to play a role in identifying what the value is and what I'm paying for it. I can't do that unless I add it to the a growing number of performance metrics that I add, not only to DR campaigns but brand campaigns. Let me see what this does to my ROI. Let me see what this does for performance. Let me see how it impacts my my ability to fulfill the objective of my client's brief. If I can do that and I'm comfortable with the price point, absolutely. I would dive in and start to test the model.
Would some of that depend on the creative then? I mean, like...
That's what I was going to say. So first of all, I find the beginning of your question sort of disheartening, Tina. I expect more from you. Yes, we're going to change one day, but what are you going to do about it tomorrow, Matt? So I think it has to come from client, because we're only going to be as good as what our clients want us to do. So sadly, it has to be about the content and its distribution being brought together. It has to be about how good is the story you're telling, not about time spent is a really good metric because it gets away from a lot of the bad things that we have been measuring. But what it can lead to is front loading, which is what Facebook's been having to deal with, like shove as much of the message into the beginning as you possibly can, stamp a logo on everything because you know that people are only going to spend 3 seconds, you don't really care because you're being paid based on those first 3 seconds. So I think that we together, content and distribution, client-led, have to get to, it's not just a media decision, it's not just a messaging decision, it's how are they working together in the benefit of, or for the benefit of, the end user, the people that are consuming the content. So I think we have to think a little bit bigger, but this is certainly a step in the right direction.
Do you have any more questions out there?
In this political season where it's an unusual blend of content and advertising, I just wonder if you have any observations of what is happening with political ads right now in this, especially when we're looking at time-based advertising. Are you noticing any trends?
I try not to pay attention to them.
Well, I mean, talk about message and medium. There is a candidate who has found a way to have a whole shit ton of free impressions. And I think we should think about that there are brands that are doing particularly good jobs of getting themselves noticed without having to pay a lot for it. And we shouldn't always be just looking for paid adjacencies.
Yeah, I think the most interesting point of that is the idea that attention being the most valuable resource can shape, obviously, political landscapes. And given the broken media market we have right now in a lot of ways, it's kind of astounding what's happened. We're not in a state that sees a lot of the political messaging, so I don't see it as on the consumer side as much.
But everyone saw the Chewbacca mask lady, right? So, okay, we're good.
Exactly, so we're fine. And a watermelon. All right, I think we're good. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.